Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/ProRevenge, where in today's episode, OP gets a super satisfying revenge on his nightmare landlord who takes advantage and torments them on a regular basis. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's lineup. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in, guys. So, Friday night here in the country can get a little crazy sometimes. So I don't mind when my neighbors cause a ruckus or loud party as long as it's not too crazy. Tonight, I'm on call for the Virginia State Police towing rotation, which means I've got 25 minutes to get to wherever the wreck, DUI, impound, etc. is. As luck would have it, my neighbors are having a party. And guess what's blocking my driveway? That's right, about 25 to 30 cars. I live down a dirt road at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it's pretty narrow. One in, one out type of deal. And with this rain we've been having, parking in the grass, clay, and mud is not really the best idea. Even with a 4x4, it can still get tricky. I noticed a few cars coming in early this evening, so I walk over to my neighbors and made it pretty clear that I was on call tonight. And as long as they don't block the road or my driveway, all would be good. No problems here. Well, at about 12:30 a.m., I get a call from my boss asking if I can go warm up the rotator and the light-duty flatbed, which are tow trucks. So I get my boots on and the other gear because if I'm up, I might as well stay at the shop and clean a few things to stay busy, to make the night move along. So I get in my car, and as I'm backing out of my driveway, I notice that I'm blocked in. And I don't mean by one truck, but by nearly 15 different vehicles. At that point, I calmly walk to my neighbors, about an eighth of a mile hike. And as I'm looking for them through the crowd of drunk teenagers, some idiot wants to know why I'm on his property. Finally, I find my neighbor, and I ask her if she can move the cars because I've got to go to work. The woman says in a normal tone, doesn't even yell over the music into the house, "Hey, whoever's blocking the driveway next door, move your trucks." And then she slams the door in my face. I knock again, and she answers with a drunken, "Oh god, this bitch again?" And internally, I'm thinking, alright then. I do my best to explain that I'm on call and I need to get out of the driveway to go to work. And she comes back sloshing a beer, exclaiming that it's a party and for me to relax. She then shuts the door in my face again, and she yells, "F that piece of crap." Hearing her say that, I smile. And as I'm walking away, a macho man throws a beer at me and he cackles, "Yeah, you better leave. Go on, get." And that's when I decided to teach them a lesson. I get on the phone with dispatch and call for as many trucks as we have available tonight, which is about 10, and tell them to come on over because Mama's got some private property impounds. I then call police dispatch and ask if they can send out an officer, in case things get out of hand. As soon as he gets to my place, my rigs start rolling up and hooking the vehicles up and taking them to the impound yard. And we towed everybody. At this point, we're down to about 3 vehicles. A yellow Civic, a gold Silverado, and an old F-150. The Civic owner bolts to his car and he takes off. The Silverado girl, pretty wasted, gets stuck and she starts tearing up my property. That's when the officer walks over and she throws a fit. Long story short, she gets arrested for underage drinking and DUI, and the Ford owner doesn't even show up. I get to work after all the impounds, and with me, I brought coffees and snacks for my drivers. Also, tomorrow's not a business day, which means if these tools want their cars back, it's gonna be the regular $289.50, plus 2 days of storage at $55 a day, and a $100 gate fee. I also make a note in the papers that the vehicle owners get to thank the girl who had the party for them getting towed. Several of the kids' parents called wanting to know where their cars or trucks were, and I gave them the yard address and told them they can come anytime. As soon as they start shouting about illegal tows and threatening with lawyers, I showed them the pictures of their cars with no parking sign. I also explained that I tried to reason with the owner of the property, and I was tired of being blocked in by drunken teenagers. There are signs on my road saying no parking and not to block the driveway. Don't piss off a tow truck driver because she'll legally take your vehicles. My goodness guys, OP went completely savage, and what a satisfying revenge. And seriously, those teenagers can 100% blame the party host for them getting towed. Like, OP tried to give everybody a chance to move their cars, and that girl just outright disrespected OP to the max, and this is what they get. And guys, you won't believe how many comments in this post are hating on OP, saying what she did was super scummy. I guess some people just hate tow truck drivers. Okay, so I lived in an illegal rental in a place that you'd call a landlord's market. There was a housing shortage, and although I had a great job, no credit problems, no background issues, it was impossible to rent somewhere affordable because of my dog. I eventually found a great place, but it came with a nutty landlord. She lived on the property. Now, I'm not a choosing beggar, however, so I take it. For 12 months, I endured the landlord's violation of my rights. She was taking deposits she shouldn't have, micromanaging my personal life and my guests. It was pretty awful. The woman was always high on painkillers with tiny pin needle pupils, telling me weird crap and trapping me in conversations that I'd rather not hear. Faced with homelessness, I take the trampling of my rights and privacy. She made me miserable, and after a year, I had enough. The woman crossed the line when she had my boyfriend removed by the police when I was at work one day. He had been staying for less than 48 hours. I was gone for 2 weeks, and I had arrived back to my rental 48 hours before this. No one was in my rental while I was gone. On top of tossing my boyfriend out, she delivered a bill for his rent and utilities for staying the past 2 weeks that I was gone, when no one was in my house. Up until this point, she'd already bullied me, and I guess she thought she could extort me. She even created fake court paperwork to intimidate me. The bills I received from her are insane. They are not the writings of a lucid human. She gets all sort of details wrong and makes personal statements that are inappropriate. The place was empty and I was gone, but she wrote a bill and insisted that I pay for his tenancy. And this is when I finally stood my ground. Extortion is the limit. Everything is falsified, and I think it was the Vicodin talking and making her brave. As an aside, that'll be super relevant later, her employer had an open fraud case against her. She told me early in my tenancy because she dared them to come after her. Perhaps she shouldn't have dared so hard. So after the fake tenancy debacle, crap gets real. I take off work to read up on my rights and protect my dog and stuff, and she starts harassing me. Specifically, she did these things over the course of a few days. 1. She would call from a blocked number and ask for a stripper or call girl. Number 2. She called my work as a new landlord seeking a reference, and told them that I was partying, which was the reason I wasn't at work. Number 3. She came into my yard at 11 o'clock at night, stomped on my porch to scare me, and then walked out of my yard saying it's a free country when I asked her what the hell she was doing. Number 4. She would call the Humane Society and tell them that I had a vicious dog on the loose who attacked her dog. And lastly, she called the police and sent them to my work, claiming she found drugs in my house. I work with kids. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out by all these things, so I got a restraining order against her. She kept trying to ruin my career and get my dog euthanized and attempting to intimidate me. It was good for 3 years, and I was happy I won in court. It was a great move for my safety and empowerment. However, when I did move, 10 days after her extortion, she falsified documents, kept my deposit, and I was forced to go back to court to get my money. Again, I won. And although it took a lot of time and energy, eventually it was garnished from her account. I not only got out of my lease rightfully, but I took my deposit back against her will. I had the restraining order for 3 years, and she didn't know my new address. I was thrilled. The torment she put me through was unbelievable. So let's cut to the revenge. Remember that fraud case she boasted about? Well, it came back to bite her. My landlord boldly did construction high as a kite on Vicodin, while collecting disability because she was wheelchair bound. You see the issue here? She played the system to get into paid early retirement, ate pills all day, increased her property value by building up her space, and collected money from illegal rentals. 4 months before I moved out, she was doing construction, and I had a strange feeling that I should document her fraud. I knew she could turn on me at any point, and I'm sure glad I had the foresight to do so. She had gone to work the first day of her contract, and she had fallen out of a wheelchair on a ramp that wasn't up to code. Almost 4 weeks later to the day, she was happily at home, continuing with her activities, building a tool shed from scratch. She was doing construction with no wheelchair. She was bold, and she figured she would never get caught. She was doing all sorts of physical activity, and that's when I decided to film her and make sure the date was noted. I also took pictures. Some part of me knew that I should just document what I was seeing because she was an awful human being who was leeching off the system. She worked in education, and she couldn't be fired. Her position was tenured, and she was holding her spot while on medical leave for over 4 years. They legally could not hire a new teacher. Substitutes poured in and out of her classroom, and hundreds of kids missed out on a legitimate education because she held her spot. She was scum. I worked in a similar field, so I knew what damage she was doing with her actions. So back to the eviction and the restraining order event. So shortly after moving out, when the restraining order was in effect, I went to her employer and offered evidence in his fraud case. It was a serious state-led fraud case against her. They were going after her, and he was elated that I had such strong evidence against her. He put me in touch with private investigators, and I handed over the evidence after sitting down with them and giving my statement of her activity and how she was mobile at home. And the thing is, I didn't even have to exaggerate. I didn't have to lie. I just told them exactly what happened. Even if she didn't burn me, I felt like I was doing my civic duty by ensuring the kids had a real teacher in their classroom, instead of this piece of garbage. Months later, I called the investigators and found out that my evidence is what sealed the deal. She was convicted of disability fraud. She was then fired from her position, and she was going to have to pay back years' worth of disability payments. I did that. I'm the reason her scam fell apart. She thought she could bully me into extortion, and she didn't. She thought she could ruin my career and hurt my dog when I stood up to her, and she didn't. In fact, I won. It was what I needed to be empowered after she crapped on me. Now, it wasn't even revenge as much as standing up for myself. If she did have to pay it all back, she'd only have her house to pay with. My dream is that she lost her house, ended up a renter, and just hopes for a kind landlord. One can only hope, guys. Like, that woman was definitely scum and she deserved the fallout she got. Like, it was only a matter of time before everything caught up to her, guys, and I'm assuming she had it coming to her for a really long time. Sophie does share a picture of their dog right here. And look at this cutie, guys. Like, this woman deserves death for trying to have this innocent dog put down by lying. And here's a picture of her doing construction when she should have been wheelchair bound, guys. Some freaking people. So this happened in my 11th year of high school. My computer class had a year-long substitute teacher because our amazing teacher was out for a year working on a government contract. The previous teacher was outstanding. He had 6 different classes in our classroom all happening at the same time. The classes were computer repair, programming, and networking. He would give a lecture for each of the classes on a specific day of the week. Programming on Monday, repair on Tuesday, and so on. And we would all work in our own groups and everything went quite well. The next year came around and I found out that we had a substitute teacher for the year. And I had 2 back-to-back blocks in this class because I was doing 2 courses. And I wandered up to the class to see what kind of teacher we were dealing with. Mainly interested because I was almost certain that whoever they found did not have the credentials to teach half those classes. The new teacher was a foreign woman that none of us had ever heard of before. For the purpose of the story, we'll call her Mrs. S. I went and found my friends to tell them what I saw. We were all optimistic because from a very short conversation, she seemed quite informed and had a good background. That didn't last long though. On the first day of class, Mrs. S introduces herself as the programming teacher, who had been in the school for 4 years. She went on to tell us about her programming experience in Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Access. She then told us that the programming students would not be doing Java and the C++ course that we had signed up for, and instead, we would be doing database and Excel because those are what she learned. And she said, and I quote, "They will be more useful than C programming and the Java." She also went on to suspend all lunch clubs because she didn't think high school students could be trusted with computers alone. Now, understandably, some of us were quite upset about that, considering we came there to program. She also didn't give the repair people or the networking people any kind of support, and she completely stopped their lectures as well, preferring to let them figure it out themselves and to self-teach, without giving them any resources to do so. This continued for about 2 weeks, until one day, she comes in and said, quite irritated, that we would actually be doing the Java now, unless we wanted to keep doing database. So we switched to Java, and she basically left us out to dry from there. Because she wasn't teaching database anymore, she came to harass people in computer repair. First, she told us the shop room was too messy, and she made us throw out 90% of our training workstations and equipment because they weren't important in her eyes. It was equipment that didn't belong to the school, but actually belonged to the other teacher. We took home what we could steal for safekeeping, but she ended up throwing away a few $1,000s in equipment. She then started imposing stupid rules on us, such as, you can't have the computer on while you're troubleshooting inside, because you could electrocute yourself. Or, you don't need the case open to troubleshoot the motherboard lights. Or, maybe you should change the power supply to 240 volts if you aren't getting enough power. Needless to say, it was a challenging time. One of the students in the networking area got fed up, and he started doing his own coursework and lecturing to us, so that we could at least get some kind of use out of the courses. To his credit, it was all very good. But Mrs. S had the balls to force him to do it from there on out, and then turned around and gave him low grades for not getting his own work done on time. A few months of this very uneasy balance go by, and my mother comes down with colon cancer. I've already had a handful of other family members suddenly taken from me by cancer, so understandably, this is a very stressful time. I was joking with my friends and trying not to break down over the whole thing. While I was working on the school desktop computer, I had a few pages open in my laptop that I was taking notes in and a Facebook tab so I can keep in contact with my mom because she was in surgery, and I was waiting for her to come out. I then look over and the teacher snooping through my laptop, opening folders and closing windows, and eventually pushes the power button until it shuts down. So this is the following conversation that happened. I say to her, "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Mrs. S says, "You shouldn't be on Facebook or writing notes in a personal computer during class time, especially when your grades are slipping." I tell her that gives you no right to touch my stuff. Mrs. S says, "Then you shouldn't have it out during class. Keep that tone up and I'll see you in detention." Now at this point, I'm just trying to keep calm because if I get too emotional, I do have the tendency to explode. So I say to her, "I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time at home right now. My mom was just diagnosed with colon cancer and I'm waiting to hear back." And this is the part that really set me off. Mrs. S says, "You don't look like a kid whose mother has cancer. Quit making sob story excuses." Hearing her say that, I'm thinking, are you effing kidding me? It took every fiber of my body not to stand up and slap her right there. I gave her the dirtiest 1,000-yard stare that I think I've ever done, while also trying not to burst out crying. I spoke to nobody for the rest of the day until I got home. People kept asking if I was okay and I ignored everyone. My mother was out of the hospital and she was home by the time I got there, and I broke down crying and told her about my day. Her face was comforting, but you could see the fire of an angry woman behind her brown eyes. She told me not to worry and that I'd be okay. A few weeks passed and I was called into the office for a one-on-one parent-teacher conference that someone forgot to tell me about. There were all the teachers I had that year, good and bad. My learning assistance teacher, the VP, and the principal herself. They told me they were there to discuss my grade slippage as soon as my mother came. My mother was about 10 minutes late, leaving me to awkwardly sit with these people. She comes in and she's all smiles and she says, "Sorry I'm late, I got held up at the hospital." It was at this point, someone, I'm not sure who, asked her why she was at the hospital and if everything was okay. My mother answered in her happy way. She says out loud, "I was just getting my cancer checked on because I have cancer." The whole room went cold, and her voice seemingly dripped with blood when she said it. My computer teacher went pale, and everybody in the room was giving a confused, "What on earth did you do?" look. My mother then proceeded to tell everyone in the room how I came home crying one day about what Mrs. S said, and at that point, Mrs. S tried to become one with the wall of the small meeting room. My mom kept it short, but to paraphrase, she said the following. She said, "How dare you say something so careless to my son? I hope you're ashamed, and I hope you don't get invited back for another year." She then returned back to her normal happy self and she discussed my grades like nothing happened, while half the teachers were still trying to figure out what just happened. My mom told them that now that she was out of the hospital, my grades should improve again, and I just sat quiet the whole time, tried to suppress bursting out laughing. After that day, Mrs. S never directly spoke to me again. She had instructions relayed through other people, or she gave them to the class as a whole, and she did her damnedest to be nowhere near me and say nothing to me. My grades improved quite a bit, and the year ended with me passing. Mrs. S was previously offered a job at the school as a secondary computer teacher, but after all that trouble, the job was pulled back. The next year, when our first computer teacher returned, he was furious to learn that most of his equipment and personal books had been thrown out, and we returned the things that we snagged during the purge, but he still lost a few $1,000s in personal teaching stuff. The school paid him back, but he says he lost so much more than that in time and preset handmade equipment. We told him about the horror show, and he gave us all an extensive test that's normally given at the end of the year, which the vast majority of us failed, and we ended up doing all the computer courses from the previous year again, because in his words, she didn't even teach us the basics. That sub can no longer teach in this or the neighboring districts. Good frickin' riddance, guys. Like, a person like her should not be teaching at all. And guys, my jaw is still on the floor from what she said to OP. "You don't look like a person whose mother has cancer." Like, what the heck does that mean? Guys, I've read so many stories on this channel, and I'm always so surprised when teachers say such outlandish things like that to students, and I personally think she deserved a lot more than just not being able to teach in the neighboring districts. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /ProRevenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's super satisfying stories. If you did, hit that like button, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories on this channel. And if you guys missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people, your favorite, where an entitled Karen demands OP give away her baby so they can stay friends. Guys, it's such a crazy story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.